Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome back to part 3 of my Unreal Engine tutorial on how to build a physics-based static thruster setup for your Unreal Engine games. So in the previous videos, we've been creating our vehicle inputs, vehicle state, and network support structures as seen here. So we have our vehicle input state, which will be carrying all of the various inputs that we will be used to maneuver our vehicle as we build out our vehicle movement component, as well as the vehicle simulation state, and this will be something that we'll be updating both on the game thread and the physics thread so that we'll have the most latest and up-to-date information on our vehicle as we are manipulating it within the game. And then finally, we also made sure that we updated our vehicle movement traits on our network objects so that later on, if we choose, we can also then run this vehicle across the network. Okay, once that was done, we then went over and created our simulation configuration. So our first one is going to be our physics static thruster setup. And this is going to be our definition of where we want to put a thrust point, right? The thrust point location on the object, the thrust point direction on the object, and then we also created a struct here to manage the thrust force that will be exerted from that point onto the vehicle. And then once all that was done, we moved over to our vehicle simulation component that we created, and that is being derived off the physics movement component over here. And as you can see, we've set that static thruster configuration. So here it is, and we're setting up it as an array so we can have multiple of these points on a vehicle, and we can configure it so that we can move this vehicle in any direction we want through the use of these static thruster configurations. And then also finally, while we were here, we went ahead and created our input functions so that we can pass those inputs from the blueprint into this component, and we made sure that all of these functions have the blueprint callable tag above them so these functions can be viewed within the editor. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and build out our test vehicles so that we can test out our configurations and make sure everything's working correctly. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize Visual Studio, and we will then do everything else in the editor. So first off, we need to make sure that we've got all of our input mapping set up. So I'm going to come into the editor. So under content and under movement, and this is where we've been building out all of the components previously, we have our inputs folder, and under inputs we have our actions. And so previously we created an AI throttle and an AI yaw, and all these inputs are just one-dimensional axes, and that's everything that we need. So I'm just going to come back here. So we've got X and Y, so let's go ahead and duplicate this for Z. So this will cover all of those axes. And then we'll create two more for the roll and the pitch. So instead of that, there's our pitch. And I'm just going to duplicate this one again. And this one is going to be for our roll. So we have 3 throttle inputs as well as 3 rotation inputs. Alright, and I'm just going to go ahead and just save all that. Alright, now that we've got that, let's go up one folder into the inputs folder, and I'm going to create a new input mapping context. So I'm just going to come up here, and we're going to come down to inputs, input mapping context, IMC, and I'm just going to call this we'll just call this thruster set. Thruster setups, I think, is a good name. So I'm just going to call it thruster setups. And we'll just pop this puppy open. Just going to hit save, make sure we got that saved. All right, so let's go ahead and start defining those inputs. So I'm going to be using a little controller, since this is going to be, you're going to be able to move this thing in 3-dimensional space. It's just a lot easier to run it on a controller. So as you can see, my input controller is set up. We're good to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and add our first mapping. Our first mapping is going to be on the x-axis. So I'm going to click the X. So this is going to be my main throttle engine. So this is how I'm going to throttle up, throttle down. So I'm just going to click on the little keyboard, but I'm going to move over to my game controller and press up. And that will automatically map us to the left game thumbstick along the y-axis. And since this is an analog controller, I'm just going to come down to our modifiers, and we're just going to add a little bit of dead zone in there, and we'll just keep the default for the dead zone right now. I think that's perfectly good. When you're using analogs, you're definitely going to want the dead zone, because even though depending on the sensitivity of the controller, you may still be putting some input into the controller, even when you think that your thumb is off the controller. There could be some input, so the dead zone will help to take that out for us. Alright, so that's that. Let's move down to let's go on the z-axis. So for z-axis, I'm going to move to the left digital pad instead, and I'm just going to click on the keyboard and hit the up game D-pad up. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the, whoops, I'm just going to do that, left game D-pad down. And then down, I'm also going to add a modifier to it. This modifier, since this is digital, we don't have to worry about dead zones, but I am going to want to negate it. All right, and then we need the y-axis thruster. So these are the y-axis thrusters. So I'm just going to put that throttle Y. Oops, nope, let's go back. Put that on the Z. I'm going to do that. And nope, I'm going to come up to the plus, my mistake. Let's put this on the Y. There's throttle Y, okay. And then the throttle Y, I'm just going to put, left is going to be on D-pad left, and right is going to be on D-pad right, and then left modifier, I'm going to go ahead and once again I'm just going to negate it. So, and we're negating left and down, because left, down, and technically back, when it comes to the vector, that's always going to be negative. You know, up, forward, and to the right, that's always going to be positive. So we want to put positive values there. Now, if you wanted to switch on your pitch, and you wanted to switch so that down is positive and up is negative, you could then, again, you could come in here and you could just change that and negate it there if you wanted to. All right, so we're good here. So let's go ahead and add the rotation control. So I'm going to come up to mapping, so I'm going to hit the little plus key. And the first one is going to be input pitch. So I'm going to put the pitch on the right stick. So again, that's the right, in the Y direction. And because this is analog, I'm going to go ahead and add a dead zone modifier. And we'll just keep all of that the same. And again, I will add another one. Actually, no, I don't need to add another one, because that should count. So I'm just going to delete that. And then, so we've got the pitch. Let's go ahead and do roll. I'm going to do the roll off the same input controller. So this time I'm going to use the other stick going the other way on the x-axis. And again, I'm going to just go ahead and add a modifier for dead zone, since this is analog. All right, pitch roll. Okay, so now we just need yaw, so I'm just going to add that one. Okie doke. And I'm going to use the top shoulder buttons. So there's my left. And oops. Click on that. There's my right. And then again, left, I'm just going to go ahead and negate that. All right. So that should do it for our setups. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this. Now let's go ahead and create that little test vehicle. So I'm going to move back into blueprints. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just duplicate the flying cube. The reason why I like to use the cube for testing is it's balanced. Its center of mass and center of gravity are both in the same place. So it's good to kind of test out your thruster configuration ideas on that before you then start moving it to an irregular shaped object. I've found, because otherwise, if you go to because when you go to irregular shaped objects, you might find that it's slightly, especially if you're taking things off the marketplace / fab store, some things might be a little bit off balance, and you may have to put some tuning parameters in, tune it a little bit using the offsets, because they're not perfectly placed and balanced. So I'm just going to go ahead. But this cube is perfectly balanced. So I'm just going to go bring it over. And we're just going to rename this. I'm going to call it thrusters. Going to open it up. All right, so first off, we don't need any of this. So let's try and delete that real quick. I'm going to come up to the cube and make sure that gravity is disabled. So I want this cube to be already in a vacuum in 0 gravity. I'm going to come to our event receive controller changed. So this is how we're going to be. So whenever the controller changes, that's when we're going to be implementing our mapping. So again, cast a player controller. If this is valid, then I'm going to go ahead and use the thrust setups. So that's there. So that should then map those correctly. So now all we need to do is map our inputs to our objects. So first off, I don't need this. And second, I'm not using object simulation. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to be using our vehicle simulation. So I'm going to go to add, go to vehicle simulation, and just put that there. And as you can see, we've got our static thruster configuration array right here, ready for us to start adding thrust setups. And then I'm just going to drag this off, and we'll find the set throttle input. So there it is. And we're just going to set this up. So again, what we did when we were creating this function, I'm just going to bring this up real quick. We went ahead and made this function take 2 values instead of just 1 value. That way we can consolidate 3 throttle inputs into 1, and we're just going to go ahead whenever we take a value, we just also take the axis so we can map this input to the right axis. So that's kind of what we're just doing there. So that's what we did in our C++. And so by doing that in the editor, that's what this node is going to look like. So here, by default, it's the x-axis. So we'll just leave it like that for x. And I'm just going to copy this and do the same thing for the y-axis. And all I need to do there is just remap it to throttle y. And then we just need our z-axis. And there's the z. Okay, so now that we've got our throttle setups set up, now let's go ahead and work on our rotation controls. So I'm going to bring in IA underscore pitch. So there's our pitch action, input action, and let's go and set this up to our pitch function. like that, and just connect those wires. And then we'll do the same thing for roll. And we just need the grab that, and we'll say set roll input. So there's our roll input function. I'm just going to connect these wires. And then lastly are your okay, there it is. Alright, everything looks like it's wired up. Just move that up a little bit. Alright, so that should be it for our input setups, which is keeping it very simple. Alright, so now let's move over to our vehicle simulation. So in vehicle simulation, I'm going to first turn on the debug. So any of our debugging stuff in there is turned on that we've added. And then under static, let's go ahead and add some thrust points. So first off, I'm going to add 2 thrust points, and I'm going to set these to the X. So there's our thrust point. I'm not going to give it a tag name. I'm going to make sure it's on. The thrust direction is going to be along the X-axis. I'm not going to put any pitch, roll, or yaw in there. And they're both going to be going in, and I'm going to have these both go in the same direction, so we're not going to use negated. As far as the thrust point location, I'm just going to go ahead and... So this one, since I'm going to use 2 of them, I'm actually going to put them on the one. Yeah, I'm going to have one plus 50, so this is the right engine. And this one is going to be negative 50 to kind of represent the left engine. And I'm going to set this to 100. No, actually, I'm going to set this to 10. And the reason why I'm going to set this to 10 is because since I have 2 of them, they're going to, I'm going to have, instead of, putting out, 100,000 each, that should give me plenty of thrust going in that direction. So I could probably do that. Maybe set that to 5 instead of, so that should give me a pretty aggressive engine or set of engines. Okay, and that's on the left and the right side, and we could try on the Z-axis. No, on the X-axis, I'm going to move these a little bit back. So they're both set a little bit back. One is left, one's right. The engine thrust is about the same, and the thrust direction is going straight back. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and compile, save, and let's go ahead and move this out and see what happens. So let's go grab our flying cube. I'm just going to put it in here. As you can see, it's halfway on the ground because the cube is, dead center within the actor. So I'm just going to pull it up. Gravity is turned off. Just double check. Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and set this up. So with it selected, I'm going to come over to details, and I'm going to tell it to set it to player 0. So when we run it, this should be what we're seeing. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and if everything looks good, there's our cube. And the controller's turned on, so let's give it a little gas, and there it is. And we're going forward with 2 engines going in the forward direction, and then we can go 2 engines back. So they're technically left and right of the cube, and they're also in the back of the cube as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop that here, and let's go ahead and set up our next set of thrust points. which is going to be our up and down, left and right. So to do that, I'm just going to add 2 points for this demo. So this one's going to be our left and right, so it's on the y-axis. And I'm just going to make sure it's on the y-axis. If you wanted to have, say, a setup where you wanted to have 2 engines and you had a thrust controller which was split, right, and you could maybe wanted to control one engine and both engines differently, you could technically have throttle X for one engine and throttle Y for the other engine, and you could set that up too. But I'm focusing more on a spaceship, so I'm just going to use this as steering thrusters. So that's set up. So Y. I've got thrust points. So here, I'm just going to keep them dead center. And as far as the force is coming in, I'm just going to go ahead and make this 5. And then on this one, this is our Z, so this is going to be up, down, and this is going to go along the Z axis. Keep that where it is. And again, I'm just going to set this to 5. And I'm going to make this 10. Alright, so I'm just going to move this off screen again. And let's go ahead and make sure that's compiled and saved. And we'll go ahead and start it. So again, forward engine. And now I'm going to go left on the gamepad, right on the gamepad, up on the gamepad, down on the gamepad. And as you can see, if you can see it in the upper corner, we don't have any maneuvering thrusters yet. As you can see in the upper corner, since we turned debug on, you can see the 3 debug values. So there's the blue, the green, and the red. It's kind of flickering a little bit since they're running on the physics thread and not on the game thread. But they're there, and we can see it, and as you can see, we're kind of flying in space and floating around. Alright, so I'm going to stop this. So let's go ahead and get our rotational thrusters set up. So to do that, I'm just going to minimize this. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So we've got 3, 4 setups right now. So I'm going to do rotate. Let's start with the yaw thrusters first. So we've got steerage, and I'm going to put 2 more in. So this is going to be our rotational thrusters. So I'm going to set this to the yaw input for both of them. And I'm going to be putting these thrusters forward and back. So the direction is going to be along. So for when doing yaw, if you want them left and right, then you're going to want your yaw thrusters along the x-axis. If you're going to be forward and back, then you're going to want them along the y-axis. So that one's on the y-axis. I'm going to put this one on the y-axis, but I am going to negate the second one. So when I put steerage in, left and right, this is going to allow me to steer, or spin in place. And so one thruster is going to be giving me, if I go left, then one thruster is going to be spinning me left, and the other one's going to be spinning the back of the cube out to the right. So that's what the negation is going to do. So I can minimize that and that. Thrust points. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the x-axis. So I'm going to put that at 50, and I'm going to put this at -50. So, and this is all off the center of the cube. And then as far as the thrust is concerned, I'm just going to keep these at lower thrusts. So we'll just keep the 1000 times 10. All right, so let's test this out real quick. So again, compile, save, make sure all the data's good. Gonna fire it up again. So now, as you can see, we can move forward, back, we can spin left, we can spin right, controlling it a little bit. As you can see, we're going to continue to go because we've got nothing pushing back on us. So it's just trying to tweak that. Again, this is all raw input. You can go up, you can go down, you can go left, we can go right. Can give it a little gas going forward. Go back. All right, so that looks good. So now let's go ahead and get our, so we have our yaw thrusters in there. Let's go ahead and put our roll thrusters in next. And I'm going to use 2 thrusters for roll. So roll, I'm going to put on the Z. Actually, no, roll is going to be on the roll. So I'm going to open both these up. So I'm mapping roll to our roll inputs source. The direction is going to be on the Z axis. And I'm going to negate this one here. And then thrust point, I'm going to offset this on the y-axis. So this one is going to be 50. And this one will be negative 50, again, to balance that out. And then thrust force, I'm just going to set this to 10. And I'm going to set this to 10. All right, so let's go ahead, compile, save, and let's see, let's make sure that our rolls work. All right, so make sure. All right, so if I roll, okay, so I've got some counter roll in there, so I can either fix this. So because I've got some counter roll, so it's going in the wrong direction, but it is rolling. So so I can fix this by going into our thruster direction for our roll thrusters. And I'm just going to say, take this in and negate. So I just switched the negation. So roll input. So the first one is now negated, and the second one I've just turned that off. So I'm going to again compile, save, and let's go ahead and start this again. I'm gonna make sure we got our input, and now it's rolling the way I expect it to roll. Alrighty. We can yaw it, roll it. Oop. Yeah, so now we just need pitch. To get us rotating in the right directions. All right, so I'm going to stop this and let's go ahead and do our pitch. So to do pitch, I'm actually going to just use 1 thruster for pitch. So I'm just going to go ahead and add 1 more, and this is going to be our pitch. And thrust direction is going to be again on the z-axis because we want to go up and down. Right now I'm just going to keep that as negated, and I'm going to move this pitch thruster plus 50 on the x-axis, and again I will make this 10. All right, so let's test this out. So compiled, saved. So again, so pitch. So if I pull up, if I push down, I'm going to go down. If I pull up, I go up. That's kind of how I want to do. That's how I think of pitch. So it works for me. And as you can see, I'm not putting any input in, but because I've got it right now, I'm only using one thruster. It is giving us some additional velocity in the forward and up direction. And that's because it's not just torquing us, but it's also moving us. So if you want it to be perfectly balanced, again, you want to just balance it. Otherwise, if you don't, you can, and you want to have a little bit of forward velocity, you could just put one thrust point, move it off center, and you will get some velocity as well as the torque. But yeah, so now we've got it there, and everything looks good. We can now fly this thing around a little bit using our steerage thrusters and our main thrusters. Oops. So as you can see, putting in the raw inputs, it can be a little bit, you know, you're definitely getting immediate input control in and out. So it definitely makes things a little bit more interesting to control, but it's all there. Let's not do that. All right, and there you go. So that's all of our movements set up. So now let's go ahead and test out our engine. So we created 2 engines. So what happens if, say, we wanted to do some gameplay and we wanted to put some damage in? So remember, we added this thrust condition % in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one engine and I'm going to set it to 0.5. So it's only going to give me 0.5 of the maximum thrust, or 50%. So now if I throttle up, oops, no, throttle up. As you can see, I'm throttling up, but I'm actually spinning. Because we've got some degradation in one of the engines now. So we're moving forward and we're spinning out of control. So yeah, so you can definitely could have some fun with gameplay just doing that. So then you'd have to go, in order to go forward, I've got to put some rotation in there to keep me going forward, because one of my forward engines is only working half as well as the other engine. And as you can see, I've also got some down in there too, or no, left and right. So you could add some gameplay challenge by, you know, like I said, looking up the thruster that you want to degrade, and then you could use that through the thrust condition. All right, so that should do it. Okay. So if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like and share my videos, as well as subscribe to my channel, and I will see you again in the next video. Cheers. Bye.